Hey everyone, so I'm just trying something new out here. So, one of the things I want to sort of get into is Reddit, and something that popped up for me straight away was this post in writing. And I thought I would just go through what I said to the person and why I think it would be an interesting video. So, I'm going to click here. So, it's in our writers, and they're asking for some honest feedback. I need some honest feedback on how good my writing is, technically and personally. Also, if it isn't too much to ask, do you think you can try and guess how long I've been writing? I didn't bother trying to guess how long they've been writing, but I just used this piece. I just realised there's more of it, but I just used this front piece here. So their writing goes: Diego propelled his foot forward, slamming into the door. Nothing. He looked around the half-kindled room, fire feeding on the walls and blocking the opening to the next room. A table with a cup of beer toppled over, drizzling down the edge, a window glistening orange, an exit. And they used a hyphen there, not a what's it. He flipped his gun around and grabbed its barrel. He used it like a mace, slamming the pistol butt into the window. Glass shattered, frost-like shards crumbling to the floor. Glass bounced on the wood, turning into little snowflakes that reflected the fire's radiance. Flame crawled closer, baring its teeth and reaching for Diego's foot, like a puma that knew no God. And I think the reason I commented on this is because, like, the scene's pretty cool, and I see their ideas. I see their ideas with the mace and the glass and stuff. So this is an honest comment. This isn't me trying to dunk on anyone or anything. This is me trying to help this guy or girl, and also let the world know my style, right? So I get where you're coming from, but the application needs to be cleaner, which it does, and we'll go through that in a moment. So I've put, usually beers don't come in cups, certainly in places a man like Diego drinks, which I think 99.9% of the population would agree with. When you think of beers, you think of either bottles, cans, or pints. So pick one and go with it, unless it's some frat party with those little red cups, which I don't think this is the kind of place that has those from the rest of the scene, right? And then I put what I would write, because it's pointless giving advice without giving an example. So I would write: the pint glass fed the floor. That way, you don't even have to, you say pint glass, you know the contents are going to be beer. You say pint glass, you know the establishment is going to be adult. And then with fed the floor, you don't have to talk about how it tipped or tumbled. You know that it's upset, it is feeding the floor. Or something along those lines. I would, condense it down. And then I go, same for the kindling line. I would write: the room now resembled kindling, because the way that he puts it, he looked around the half-kindled room. It's a little bit off kilter for me. I think that sometimes you can just be a little bit more standard, and it doesn't hurt. The room now resembled kindling. It already suggests he saw that things were on fire, right? For the mace, this is the part that I would definitely change, because this is a little. The idea is cool, and I like how they liken it to a mace, and using it, basically as a little fire escape hammer. But I don't think they did it very well, which is where, like I said, it needs to be cleaner, comes in. So what I would probably do is say something along the lines of disregarding his pistol's main function, because then that gives the reason for why he used the gun the way he did. And then I would follow it with: he swung it like a mace. So that it makes a little bit more sense. He's not using it as a weapon in its intended sense, but it has that weaponized feel to it. So, in a sense, that sentence is possibly the one with the most. It could be the best if it's worked on, because I do like how they likened it to a mace, but it just doesn't make sense in my mind the way that they've portrayed it. So I hope that, and I'm not saying they need to take my words verbatim, just the idea of what I'm trying to do, which is explaining why he's not using it as a weapon, but its action is still weaponized, which is, I think, the root of their idea. And then I put even on from there. I wouldn't go into in depth as they would. I would just put shattered glass rained, which again, condensing. The swing shattered the glass, and the rain part explains how it fell to the floor. You don't need to go into that again. And then I put, as the reader can fill the blanks, they know that the pint was upset, the swing smashed the glass, which is what we've explained. Also, you can't have glass crumbling and bouncing, as it does neither, so beware of physical properties, which is definitely a thing that people need to understand. And I think this is something that is even more important with game design, and is something that is perhaps like a USP from my photography days, because, what glass bounces, like if you wanted to keep it, it would impale into the wood, right? Like a large shard. And if you wanted to keep, well, I keep saying he because, like I'm a guy, so I usually say he, but they, and if you wanted to keep the little snowflakes crumbling, glass doesn't crumble at all. You could, like I would liken it, if you wanted to keep the weaponized like idea, maybe caltrops, something like that. I still think rained or something like that resembles what would happen with shattered glass better. And then onto the final line, I put, as for the Puma line, I would not go that in depth and say something like, the snarl of flame caught his foot within heathen jaws, and leave the rest to imagination. The reader will picture a wolf, a lion, a puma, likely whatever they are most afraid of. So you've still got that animalistic, snarl. You've still got that, like a puma that knew no God. That's a bit much, but heathen still plays with his idea, still plays with what they're trying to go for. But I just think, like I said, they can be cleaner about it and be more accurate about it in terms of states of being with the kindling, what actually would be in terms of like a glass for if it was a wine glass maybe, but a beer glass, and that's my comment, and I'm hoping it will help them, but I'm also hoping that it will show the entirety of our writers, the kind of writer I am as well. There's a lot of different comments here. It needs to flow better. A lot of fantasy language with guns. Again, I don't think they understand where the dissonance is, but they don't understand why. Then he talks about a white guy writing Latinos, when I don't think that's the case at all. I think it's more of a disconnect with the situation rather than an actual race thing or even gender thing if they're female. I just think, Diego could be anything, but he's clearly a tough guy in a fire. And they say, really, they're a fantasy writer, but it doesn't matter, Like the viscerality of shattered glass and a flame doesn't matter whether you're in 2042 or 1442. And the same goes for the weapon. It doesn't matter if it's a Smith & Wesson, whether it's a Glock, or whether it's a broadsword or a mace. It's a different kind of language you need to use, right? Or alternatively, if you use sweet language, like usually not for weapons, sometimes for weapons, but usually for vehicles, there's something in that as well that you can do. But you have to be aware of it and be writing for the dissonance rather than writing and then dissonance appearing. Way too much past tense, present tense ending in a sentence. Puma that had no God, funniest thing I've read in a while. Again, I like the idea, but it's clearly not landing with people. That's why I wouldn't say scrap it. But I think that a simple one line like the heathen, you could replace that with heathen, and there's probably more descriptors that would fit in for that to give the same idea. The disrespect, right? That's what it is. It's the sacrilege of the flame. So let's keep going, which is actually, talking of dissonance, you've got like a puma that knew no God. Well, obviously pumas don't really give a crap because they're animals. Second of all, if you're looking at Aztecs, pumas are actually likened to the spiritual, if not the divine. So I don't think that's a great parallel for what humans as a species know is subconscious. Pumas are actually quite close to that divine, aren't they? Especially when you think of Aztec, Maya. I would definitely not keep those two together, but I understand the primalcy and the sacrilege, which is kind of strange because, yes, flame is primal, but flame is also the opposite of sacrilege. Usually when you talk about flame, it's oddly in a cleansing way. If you look at media historically, right, cleansing flame. It's why they burned witches, right? The flame wasn't the demonic, it was the witch that was demonic. And you don't have to be writing genre to understand this because it's all pop culture, it's all subconscious things. It's all just stuff that is in the zeitgeist that you have to be aware of. So yeah, I think this is a really cool little thing that I came across. I'm really happy that I came across this, and I'm really happy that I can talk about this because I think this is definitely worth dissecting. And as we always say, this is Banshee Interactive. I'm David Roberts, and remember, this is not a simulation.